2nd Street from Washington to Jefferson Street, right outside my office. There's 31 parking spots there. I counted them. There's 31 parking spots. 2 of those parking spots are handicapped, and that's on Washington Jefferson Street. And that's a real busy area. 31 parking spots, it says, and there are 2 handicap spots there. And tonight, there was 1 parking spot available besides the 2 handicaps. The rest of them were full. But anyway, like I say, there is a parking problem downtown, and so I think that, like Marshall says, I think that there needs to be addressed a little bit better than what we may have done in the past. But just as it says in this code, educational institutions, except for located in the University of Idaho University zoning district, says educational institutions, says 1 per employee, 1 parking spot per employee, and support staff plus 1 for each of the 5 students. So if you take 300 students and you take 1 of 5, that's 60, plus the 44, that's where they come up with 104 parking spots that are required. And then, of course, we had allocated the 57, but so I can see where the code kind of addresses the fact that we should be looking more at 104, but there aren't that many parking spots downtown, that are available generally during the day. So that's not really a good number to work towards. But I do think that knowing this research that we've gotten from the city at 1230 really does help address our concerns, or notice that we have a bigger problem downtown, and that doesn't even reflect the fact that the students are here. So I think, like Marshall, I think that we really need to address the parking a little bit more than we had in the past.
Lorraine?
I'm really concerned about the displacement of customers from businesses in the central business district, because because we're going to be bringing in a whole lot more humans that are going to be regularly in downtown and potentially requiring parking than have been there before. And for example, I'm on the board of the Moscow Food Co-op, and they've got a private parking lot, and it is full so much of the time. They have a lot of problems with parking poachers, which I think you've alluded to, Mr. Bush, that just keeping people who aren't customers from using the spaces. And people have different needs, and even though theoretically a student is going to be able-bodied and able to walk half a mile from an off-street parking facility to the college, if the weather's lousy, maybe they won't. And if the weather's lousy, then a lot of people who are normally bike commuters or pedestrians who aren't affiliated with the college are also going to want to be bringing their cars downtown. And my worry is that a lot of people might say, oh, I'd rather go shop out at the mall where I know I can get a parking space than do my errands downtown, because it's a zoo and I can't find any place to put my car. And if I'm going to be carrying my purchases, then it's a lot more, more important to those consumers that they find parking near to the businesses that they're patronizing than it is to our students. But you can't just look at it as what are the needs of the students. I think it's what are the needs of all of the users of the business district, and particularly of the patrons who drive the economy of our downtown businesses.
Marshall?
Well, if this facility, or this application for this facility, was located 1 block to the north, they'd be required to have 104 spaces. And it's going to have, to me, it's going to have the same impact, whether it's 1 block to the north or if it's where it is located. So I would move approval of the conditional use permit with 2 conditions. One, that there are 104 parking space off-street parking spaces provided, and that those off-street parking spaces be within 1/4 mile of the facility and not 1/2 mile.
You actually read my mind, because I was thinking basically this is really going to go back potentially to City Council to determine whether or not the summertime counts need to be modified, whether or not it's located within the central business district or outside of it. Going a quarter or half mile out is really not realistic. So I guess, are you making that as a formal motion?
Yes.
Okay, before we ask for a second, Bill?
It would just help, I'd hope to encourage the board to refer to what new information is leading you to this different conclusion than what the board made previously. So it's important that this matter was brought back to the board for you to have additional information in consideration. That additional information were those additional parking counts. So what has changed from the information that you had previously that you made that decision based upon, and the new information? So it's just encouragement to the board, if you're going to modify and double the off-street parking requirement from what was originally proposed, that you articulate upon the record what was the basis of that change of decision.
I haven't changed my position. I voted no the first time.
And I understand that.
But you also understand, just, Mr. Chair, you also remember the board's already made a decision. Individually, you may have been, but the board has made a decision. If you're
Right.
going to change the board's position, you're going to have to need that language as to what facts that were added in that changed it.
Which is why I would like to have a discussion before we even ask for a second, because we might find that we don't get a second after we've discussed it. So, who would like to?
Well,
Mark?
I'll start off. I think if we were moving this one block north and we were having a requirement of 104 parking spots, we're still having the same discussion. In my opinion, we're still having the same discussion. Again, I haven't heard anything different than what we heard last time. The impact on the neighborhood, the impact on downtown businesses, this is all the same information. As I'm looking at this in terms of what Mr. Belknap's, I think, made a good point, what has changed to cause us to change a decision, and the only new information we have is the parking counts, which, again, that's really the information that we have. So I don't know that there's enough for me to radically change the decision that we made last time, which would more than double. I mean, basically, that would more than double what we required last time. So,
Any comments on the distance?
I think about the parking over near the Kibbe Dome, which back when I was in school, you didn't have to pay to park clear out there in the dirt, and now you do. And that's a healthy walk. Now, I don't know how it compares to a quarter mile versus a half mile, but I expect that getting into campus is probably a similar distance. Now, getting to law school, it's a quarter mile. It's a little bit shorter, but quarter mile. Looking at the map, I don't know where you find it in a quarter mile. That seems awfully restrictive.
And kind of,
Please, yes.
and I thought at first that it may have been restrictive, but then I drove around to see the vacant areas within a quarter of a mile. And granted, the ownership to me wasn't absolute who owned it, but there were vacant lots, large pieces of property within a quarter of a mile, and whether they could be bought or leased or rented or whatever, I have no idea. But there are multiple small spots that could be available, or a few large spots within a quarter of a mile that could be available.
So I want to ask you and Steve kind of a loaded question, because you both have commented that you work downtown. So you've physically seen the lack of parking spaces, but the new information we were given tonight really doesn't show much difference between the original and the old, and the actual number differential actually stayed the same. So in order for your motion and to address what staff just said, are you saying that this, do you feel this information is still not accurate? Okay, Steve? Counting.
Okay. I just looked through my map here, and the immediate area right around CJ's, the Eagles, Humbleberger, Mingles, right around there, there's 40 parking spots that are available, that they have listed here, 40 parking spots that are, on the average, are available, during the day. But those would be the ones that would be hit pretty hard by that influx of students. It'd be within that real close range, and so seems to be 40 there. After that, then they have to move. They would have to walk over as far away as Jackson, and there are more parking spots over in Jackson Street. But again, I think like you both have mentioned, a half mile might be a little bit ambitious, and narrowing it down to 20 to 1/4 mile might be more realistic for people walking from where they would leave their car. But it does impact the businesses downtown tremendously, because those businesses also expect or rely on those parking spots during the day, and so again, it really concerns me for the businesses downtown, but also again my concern about the private parking lots downtown that aren't being considered, and one of my parking is right down there. It's right there, and so is Corner Clubs, and there's a number of people that have pretty good sized parking lots that'll be impacted by this tremendously.
Well, I'd like to make this comment first. If you're suggesting adding 104 just because located north a block would require that, you're kind of making the assumption that the 40 stalls around that building belong to the businesses around it, and it really would come down to who got there first. Mm-hmm. And so, that said, it seems like the difference between 104 and 40 is actually 64 stalls, give or take math, versus 47. So if we decide we want to add more, now what's the justification of adding 104 versus adding 64 versus keeping it at 47? Because again, any business moving into that is going to require parking on different amounts based on scenarios 1, 2, and 3 that we saw. And they're going to be just as, they have just as much right to use those immediate 40 regardless of the building use.
Mm-hmm. Hold on now a second, Joe. I thought that a business within the central business district didn't require off-street parking.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
It doesn't.
So-
I'm just
right.
saying,
No,
based on the occupancy of the building, every building's going to have someone going there with a car, whether or not the central business district requires you to actually allocate a spot for it. That's not what I meant. What I meant was, regardless of what goes in that space, someone's going to drive there. And they're allowed to park anywhere downtown they want to. So just because this is a different use doesn't mean they shouldn't be able to use those. They're going to use those. It's a matter of who gets there first. So our whole condition is we're adding additional parking to accommodate an amount of cars. If we're going to change that amount of cars other than what staff's come up with twice, why?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I also want to clarify that the council did request a review the method of parking mitigation calculation. So my earlier comments were not intended to dissuade the board from reviewing and coming up with a rational basis if you feel that the information and further consideration deems that you want to have a different number. I just want to make sure that you do articulate that the new information should play a role in that decision, and your reconsideration for whatever mitigation you feel is necessary should be have a rational basis to it. For staff, when we looked at it, in principle, the city has committed to provide public parking for all of the properties within the central business district and does not require off-street parking. And so if it was a typical, what we would find to be probably the most common use would be some sort of office and retail, which is the predominant use downtown. That was the 57 parking spaces that essentially the city has committed to provide. And so our thought process was that then they would be required to mitigate their disproportionate impact above that in some fashion by providing off-street parking in some place. The board certainly is free and clear to come up with a different determination. We just want to ensure that it is rational in its basis and that the new information plays a role in the formation of that.